My £8.50 revenge on my cheating, thieving ex, by user revolutionary_ant209. When I was at uni, I started dating this guy. At first, he was wonderful. Dedicated to his studies, fun to be around, attentive, and always surprising me with things, working hard at his job etc. Then, bit by bit, things unraveled. He started skipping classes. Then he barely bothered to go at all. Worse still, he never helped around the house. Never washed up, cleaned up, did laundry nothing. He was even fired from his job for too many no-shows. All he wanted to do was sit at home and play Xbox or browse the message boards and forums. This was in the days before social media, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. This left me having to pick up extra shifts, sometimes double and triple shifts, all while going to class and studying. I later learned that this was a pattern for him. He'd be really dedicated to whatever he set his heart on, but then get bored, and fall back into old bad habits. Then he'd find a new passion and rinse and repeat. I knew I should have ended the relationship much sooner, but I held out hope that he would snap out of it, that maybe it was just exam stress getting to him. I desperately wanted things to go back to how they were. But it was not meant to be. I caught him cheating and threw him out. I was so stressed with everything that it wasn't until the next day that our joint savings account crossed my mind. There was a little over £5,000 in there, and bar a few hundred from him, the rest was money I had saved. I checked the account, and it was all gone. My ex had cleaned out the account and moved into a new flat with his side chick. I called the bank. There was nothing they could do. He was authorized on the account. I contacted the police. They told me there was nothing they could do since it was a joint account, so nothing criminal had happened. They suggested taking it to civil court, but said I'd probably spend more money than I got back in legal fees, so it likely wasn't worth it. My ex had stolen £5,000 and there was nothing I could do about it. I felt like such an idiot. I got even angrier when I saw his posts on various forums boasting about his new game consoles, new games, new TVs and gadgets. All bought with my money. I'm not usually a vengeful person. Petty on occasion, sure, but I've never wanted to exact revenge as much as I did right then. And I knew just how to do it. While I was a student, I tempied every summer to help pay for my studies. One such job had been for a debt collection agency. The work was as shitty as you can imagine, but it paid really well, and it was only for a few months. My ex had been dodging debt for many years, and he was very proud of that fact. He was also proud of the fact that his debt was close to being statute barred and he hadn't paid a penny. For those of you who don't know, in the UK, creditors have about 6 years to collect a debt, and then it becomes statute barred. That means the money is still owed, but creditors have no legal way to enforce payment, such as using bailiffs. My ex was a few months away from reaching statute barred status. However, what a lot of people don't know is that making a payment on that debt resets the clock. If you pay any amount, then that 6 years starts from scratch. Previously, I had used my insider knowledge to help him dodge the debt. Now, I would use it to hit him where it hurt. By the end of our relationship, I was handling everything including his debts. I had the paperwork, so I knew who he owed and how much. I called his creditors up. I was honest and said I was a friend calling to make a payment on his behalf. I didn't pretend to be him because that would be a big legal no-no. They weren't allowed to disclose any details, but they were able to take payment. I paid the minimum I could on each debt, about £1 on most, but one had a minimum payment of £1.50. It was the best £8.50 I have ever spent. I also made sure to give them his new address and contact details, as well as his parents' address. Having worked in the biz, I knew they wouldn't change the address since I wasn't the account holder, but they would note it. They had various systems where they could search for his name against that address and see if anything came up. If they got a hit, they'd change the address. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait. A few months rolled by. Then it happened. His posts on the forums went from boasting about his new gaming PC to panic about a court date. He called me and begged for advice. I told him to F off. Seeing I wouldn't help, he asked for advice in the forums. One of his online friends told him not to turn up to court, that way they wouldn't be able to prosecute without him there. It was terrible advice that was 100% untrue. In fact, not showing up is one of the worst things you can do, especially in civil court. This was getting better and better. The court date came and went. My ex, naturally, didn't go. A few weeks later, my ex posted photos of his empty flat. Bailiffs had cleaned him out and taken every last one of his shiny new gadgets and toys. On top of that, he ended up with several CCJs, county court judgments. These are a big deal and can seriously damage your credit history, making it hard to get bank accounts outside of basic ones, near impossible to get credit, including getting a mortgage, and it can also make it hard to rent a place since many landlords don't like renting to people with CCJs as they're considered high risk. He also won't be able to find jobs in the financial sector. Now that he was broke and didn't have nice things, his side chick left him. I never got my £5,000 back, but it felt good to see everything he bought with his ill-gotten gains taken away. Hope that £5,000 was worth it. For anyone wondering how a student accrued 6 years of debt, he started at the university I attended when he was 25. He had initially gone to a different university at 18 but dropped out at 19 and went into the world of work. Then he convinced his parents to fund a business degree. He wanted to become an entrepreneur. And for anyone worried about the age gap, I deferred my uni start date by a few years so I could travel. I was 22 when we started dating. He was 26. Hoisted by his own petard, by usermac_oxonfire. I have a friend called Carrie who just broke a story to me. Not sure if it's petty or pro-revenge, or even malicious compliance, but here it is. Done on phone, and autocorrupt hates me. TL drive at the end. The cast, names have been changed to protect identities. Carrie, my friend, and the heroine of the story. Sharon, the secretary with loose morals. Roger, IT manager, and villain of the story. Yvonne, the CEO and company owner, also owner of 3 or so other small companies, one of which was in the same office block. Olivia, Roger's wife. Carrie works for a small IT company as a programmer and web designer along with about 8 others, including her manager and her newest colleague, Sharon the secretary. Roger is a womanizing rogue who makes frequent moderately offensive comments about women, customers and staff, like he has no brain-mouth filter. Sharon is, as Carrie puts it, an upwardly mobile skank who will literally, yes, actually, blow the boss if he buys her new shoes, so, boner for a bonus. And she has had a bonus, just not for productivity. The first Carrie knew about Sharon's behavior was late one Saturday afternoon, when everyone had left for the weekend, except Carrie as she had a project. She was beavering away at her desk in a nearly silent office when she heard a squeal. She immediately got up to investigate, and found her boss door ajar. She heard another squeal, and walked in. Finding Sharon bent over the desk with her skirt hitched up above her hips, her boss, trousers round his ankles, balls deep behind her. Yes, this is artistic license, but that's how she described it. Roger's expression indicated fury and embarrassment and he sounded to be mid-nut. Sharon had an expression like the cat that had the cream, with no pun intended. She certainly didn't seem bothered about being caught. Roger recovers his composure, puts his trousers back on and called Carrie back into the room. She hadn't stopped to watch, and threatened to fire her if she let slip what she'd seen. The instruction was tell nobody. Act like it never happened. It's important at this point to mention that this was at the height of COVID, and they were looking at the possibility of reducing staff numbers, something which fortunately never happened, but at the time of this story, nobody was sure. Carrie kept quiet. Ooh, that's nice alliteration. Roger would occasionally remember that she knew what he was up to, and would give her dirty looks, but little more was said. Sharon and Roger were still having regular sex at work, and Sharon was getting the bonuses that the team should have received. She was also receiving boners, but nobody would have felt jealous had they known. One Saturday, about 6 months after the initial shock discovery, an opportunity for revenge, and technically malicious compliance, presented itself. Olivia, Roger's wife, popped in. The staff were still there, and the office was busy and a bit noisy. Roger had excused himself to his office with Sharon early as he knew his wife would be in later to meet him and wanted to get his end away before she arrived. She was early. Olivia was standing at Sharon's desk. Sharon was the secretary, after all, and Carrie saw an opportunity. She offered to help, in the absence of the secretary, and Olivia asked to see Roger. Carrie obliged. The next bit is a little vague, as Carrie skipped some details, but, apparently, she knows how to get past the lock on his office door, like the door frame is a little too big, and that's the vague bit. Carrie was able to open the door as if it wasn't locked, and hold it open for Olivia, who walked in to see her husband screwing the secretary from behind. Olivia's eruption was one of incandescent fury, which caused Roger's excuses to melt away. He was trying to explain that it wasn't what it looked like while pulling his trousers up. Sharon, meanwhile, had tried to discreetly leave, but Olivia had turned her full wrath on Sharon's direction, so Sharon excused herself by asking Roger why he'd never told her he was married. He had actually told her, but the ruse worked. Roger stared daggers at Carrie, but she told him that she'd done as he asked. She had never told anyone, and had acted as if it had never happened. Just as he'd demanded. Olivia asked what she meant, and she explained in painful detail what had been going on. With Olivia screaming blue murder at Roger, nobody heard the big boss, Yvonne, arrive. He must have heard the ruckus and come to investigate. At this point, he'd heard enough from outside the office, and Carrie was asked to leave. Roger doesn't work there anymore, and neither does Sharon. Sharon was dismissed for gross misconduct, and Roger is awaiting a court date, something about fraud or embezzlement or something. Details are sketchy here. No information about his marriage. Sorry. Carrie is still at the company, but now works as an assistant manager to a newly appointed female manager. TL Drive manager screws around and threatens staff to keep it secret. Staff does exactly as told. Manager gets caught, humiliated, and fired. Edit for Cock UPS.